I felt like a victim quite often, especially as a child. I went through some, horrific bullying and dealt with some pretty ugly things growing up, and yeah, I felt like a victim quite a bit until I decided I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. There's always going to be things in this world that are outside of our control, things that happen to us, but it's a matter of how we react to them that really makes the difference, Linda.
Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about overcoming victim mentality. I'm delighted to welcome Wilk Wilkinson. Wilk is a husband, father, Christian conservative, and the host of the Derate the Hate podcast. You can reach Wilk at his website, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Wilk. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
So great to be here, Linda. Thank you so much for having me.
I am delighted. And for us, this is not our first conversation, it is our second. And we consider each other old friends because we are on the same page, which is so fantastic. So today, as we are talking about overcoming victim mentality, well, have you ever felt like a victim?
I felt like a victim quite often, especially as a child. I went through some, horrific bullying and dealt with some pretty ugly things growing up, and yeah, I felt like a victim quite a bit until I decided I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. And yeah, that was is one of those things that I finally just decided I'd had enough and wasn't going to do it anymore. So that's when I started working towards a better path.
Let's kind of expand that a little bit. So the things that happened to you. So you were a victim of bullying. So what is the difference, do you think, between having bad things happen to you and having a victim mentality that carries with you throughout your whole life, even when you're an adult?
Well, for me and my life experience, what it was just deciding that, the world was going to be full of things that I could not control. The world was going to have, there's always going to be things in this world that are outside of our control, things that happen to us, but it's a matter of how we react to them that really makes the difference, Linda. It's when it comes down to it. We people and I will never discount the ugly things that happen in people's lives because they are there, they are real, and the way that we feel about them is very real, and sometimes it's incredibly difficult to move beyond that. But how we react to them outwardly and how we go about our lives post incident, whatever that incident happens to be, post event, whatever that event happens to be, how we react to it and how we allow that to manifest in our lives moving forward really makes the difference. And that's where we have a choice to make as an individual. How are we going to react to this?
I agree completely. And I really appreciate that as you were explaining that, you validated that real things happen and ugly things can happen. And you also validated our feelings. We
Hmm.
don't have to say, oh, well, you shouldn't feel that way, because it's not fair to tell someone how they should or shouldn't feel. What I like to say is there's a lot of unnecessary suffering. And so we can help to eliminate that unnecessary suffering. And I love your whole message about ending the victim mentality. And to me, that's also very important. And I like to say we don't have to be a victim or even a survivor. We can be the champion of our own story as we overcome. But that takes a change in the way that we think. And I think that's what you have experienced, where we have something that happened to us and it affects us deeply. And then those, the way that it changed us, the way that it makes us think and feel, we carry it with us forever.
Hmm.
Unless we become aware of it and make a choice and make a change. Was there anything that happened to you that made that deciding point where, you know what, I'm done with this. I don't need to be a victim. I'm ready to be a champion.
I don't really know if there was one defining moment, but there were definitely long periods of time where, I was just going through and trying to figure out how to feel better because I felt so bad for so long in so many situations, and then those bad feelings, become feelings and oftentimes manifest themselves in self-destructive behaviors and stuff like that. And I went through so much of that, Linda, and I would have conversations with friends and family, and I do remember one conversation with my dad where uh he said, nobody can change the way that you feel, and you can't even change the way that you feel. And those feelings are very real, but you have the obligation to change how you act. And and it took a very long time for me to fully grasp what he was saying, in saying that. But that really that phrase, among many others that I had from conversations with my dad back then, but that was one of those things that nobody can change the way that you feel. Nobody, you can't even change the way that you feel, but you have a responsibility to change the way that you act. And that really, that conversation may have been the tipping point, but it took me a lot. It took me a very long time to start realizing that and putting that into place in my own life.
That is fantastic. And I love that it gives us a starting point. It is hard, if not impossible, to just flip a switch and change the way that we feel. But there is something we can do, and we start by controlling our actions.
Mhm.
So that gives us really a point of power where we could do something about it. That's neat. Sounds like you have a wise father.
I I did have a wise father. For all his faults, he was an incredible man, and he passed on several years ago. I take a lot of the life lessons, both good and bad, from the time that I get to spend with him. Obviously growing up and things like that. And yeah, that's another one of those stories, Linda, where uh, sometimes we realize our lessons way too late, and much of the thing, or many of the things that my father taught me, I didn't really learn until after he was gone. And so, as I sit here today, much of who I am today is because of him. But like many things in life, he didn't get to see those things come to fruition. But it's
But
just the way
his
that it works.
legacy carries on.
That's absolutely right.
And
That's
I'm
absolutely
sure
right.
that he is aware and pleased with the progress that you have made. So,
Thank you.
well, let's explain for people who maybe don't understand what a victim mentality is and what it feels like and how it affects our behavior, because you talked about our actions. So, what did it feel like? What does it do to the way that you see the world and the way that you see yourself and the way you see other people, even?
So the one of the things I talk a lot about, Linda, is the perpetual victim mentality. And the reason I call it a perpetual victim mentality is because it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. As as we get stuck in that victim mentality, it really boils down to the reticular activating system in a lot of ways. And when we feel like a victim, we start to seek out points of affirmation for our victimhood. And in doing so, our brain can only focus on so many things at any given time. So if we are uh, seeking out those points of affirmation for our victimhood, we can find them. oh, my boss is so mean. He does this, or that person cut me off in traffic. This is just the way it is for me. I'm always in this bad spot where I can never get a break, or, to make a funny joke that my uncle tells sometimes is, if my ship comes in, I'm going to be sitting at the train station, right? Now that's a joke, but it's a reality because people, when they uh when they when they feel like, oh, I can't get a break, or nothing ever goes my way, or I can't do this, it's to quote another friend of mine, neo-positivity, thoughts become things, right? They become things because we manifest the things that are most familiar and that we hang on to. So if we feel like we're a victim, we'll constantly be pointing out those things that make us feel like a victim. Now, the converse to that, and what's so great, is if we can start to look towards the positive in life and what is going right and focus on those things that we do have in our lives and that we are grateful for, that reticular activating system works the same way. If we start to focus on what we're grateful for, we start to see more things that we are grateful for, or things that we should be grateful for. If we present ourselves with a smile, other people will smile back at us. It's a contagious thing, you know. So it's up to us. I always tell people, no two journeys are identical, but my personal path begins with gratitude and personal accountability. I just choose to be grateful and look around this world that we live in, and really just absorb and enjoy and express my gratitude for the great things that are happening around me and in my life. And it's a natural evolution. It continues to grow. And then the personal accountability part, by recognizing that I can't control. There's so many things. There's far more things in each of our individual lives that are outside of our control than are in our control. So let's focus on those things that we can control, and just it becomes a much better way to live.
That is awesome. Man, you covered so many things in that little statement there, that little story, that it's going to be fun to go back and pick things apart and say, okay, you talked about this and you talked about this. You just gave us some action steps, some things that we can do to get out of the victim mentality. And we'll go back to that. You also talked about self-fulfilling prophecy, which is so important to recognize, that when we have that feeling like our ship never comes in, is there a reason why? And are we possibly part of the problem? When we say those things over and over again, I don't think many people realize that we are actually kind of saying, this is the way it is. And then we make sure that it happens that way. And so if we want something to change, then the thing that needs to change is us. You also talked about something that I'm not sure all of our listeners are going to be aware of, and that is the reticular activating system. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that? Do you want me to summarize what that is?
Well, I can talk a little bit more about it, and then if you want to dive in with anything that I missed, Linda, you're more
Absolutely.
than welcome to do so.
Yeah.
But
So let's say I've never heard of that. I don't even know what you're talking about. Is that English? So can you tell me what that is and why it makes a difference?
okay, from an actual physical scientific standpoint, it's like this little bundle of nerves at the back of your brain that it's like the gatekeeper as to what's coming in and into our brain, because we can only focus on so many things at any given time, right? So the example I like to use is the car that I drive, or I drive a pickup. I drive a Chevy Silverado, and before that, I had a Chevy Avalanche. Well, when I drove my Chevy Avalanche, I saw every Avalanche that was out there on the road because it was what's most familiar to me. So, what's most familiar to us will stand out in our brain. And since we can only focus on so many things, a very, very small number of things, comparatively speaking, to all the things that are going on around us in this world, So when I had my Chevy Avalanche, I saw every avalanche that was on the road every day. I mean, they just stand out. They pop. I also drive a Harley Davidson. When I'm looking around, I am more aware of motorcycles, especially Harley Davidsons, than other people that maybe do not ride motorcycles. Well, once I got rid of my Avalanche and bought my Silverado, now I start to see more Silverados and I see less Chevy Avalanches. Okay. It's a very simplistic way to explain it, but the same thing happens with what's going on in the world around us and in the life that we live. If we are stuck in our own misery, if we are stuck in the things and we just constantly focus on all the bad things that have happened in our life, especially things that are outside of our control, those things naturally become more evident to us in our life, and then that's all we can focus on because we're only so we've only got so much depth in what we can focus on in life. If we are focused on the negative, we will find more negative. If we are focused on the positive, the things that we can be grateful for, we will find more positive and find more things to be grateful for.
That is fantastic. So I like the explanation and I appreciate that. And I hope people can kind of grab onto the idea that this is a part of our brain. We have a lot of input. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of cars and trucks and motorcycles out there. And it wasn't that actually there were a whole bunch of avalanches and then everybody sold their avalanches and they all bought Silverados because Wilk bought a Silverado. It is because we notice the things that are important to us. And so even though the other things are out there, whether it's good, bad, ugly, whether it's something we're familiar with or not, it's there, but we don't notice. We don't see things. So if I am focused on the negative in my life, there might be good things happening that I can't see, that
Mm-hmm.
I don't notice and I'm not even aware of. And I think that's where your idea of the gratitude helps, is it can help me become aware of, oh, look, this is a good thing that happened. This is a good thing in my life that exists. And the more we focus on those things that we're grateful for, and we can focus and then we can notice more good things.
Mm-hmm.
So that is excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So it's interesting. I hope people are become aware. It is when we choose what we focus on, it's not just mental. It is physiological. It makes a change in the way that we see things and what we notice. And so it's really pretty cool, actually, if you think about it.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal tool, and just like any other tool, or any other tool or skill or exercise, the more we practice it, the more we use it, the better we become at it. And it's a muscle just like any other muscle that has to be worked. And it's amazing. And the best thing is it's the satisfaction that we get from it. You start to see almost instantaneous results. Unlike going to the gym, which I don't do enough of either, but it's one of those things that if we practice it, it gets better. We start to feel better. People will notice. You will notice. As an individual, it's just beautiful. It's one of those things that if done, you will get the results that you're looking for.
I love results. I love results. I want to, if I'm going to get some positive results, then I am far more likely to take the steps that I need to do it. So if I practice gratitude and I'm able to switch my focus, then my brain is going to start working for me rather than against me to help me find those things that are positive and those things that are good about my life.
Mhm.
Fantastic. So, one more thing about victim mentality that I have noticed for my friends and associates who struggle with that is and you talked about personal accountability, and I would love to go in that a little bit more. In a victim mentality, it often seems like everything is everybody else's fault,
That's right.
and the world is out to get me. I am just this helpless little victim. It has nothing to do with me. And it feels I don't know. Sometimes a little bit like a get out of jail free card. Like I don't have to do anything because it's not my fault anyway. Stuff just
Hmm.
happens to me. So let's talk a little bit about personal accountability. So if I'm feeling this way, like life is hard to me, it's not my fault. It's just that other people are mean. Is there any advantage to getting over that versus just staying where I'm at?
Yeah, absolutely there is. And this is the one thing for me that stands out so much in that concept, Linda, is I am a person who loves freedom. I love individual liberty. And by taking myself out of the equation and saying, well, this is just the way that it is. Everything bad happens to me. I can't do anything about this. That is me saying I am powerless over my life. I am powerless over what is happening to me instead of taking accountability. Because going back to the idea of, yeah, I always get cut off in traffic, or people are cutting in front of me, or and people who are, are constantly saying, like, let's just use the traffic example, right? People are always getting into my space. I can't do anything about it. They're constantly cutting me off, blah blah blah. Okay. I practice and I teach something called, well, it's called the Smith system principles, or Smith system keys for collision avoidance, right? And that's all about space cushion driving. If people aren't close to you, you can't hit them and they can't hit you. It's all about personal accountability. It's how do I maintain a big enough cushion to make sure that I'm not going to hit anybody and they're not going to hit me. You know what? Sometimes that requires me backing off the throttle and opening up that cushion. Just because somebody pulls right in front of me doesn't mean I don't have the ability to back off, and you take that same principle in life. If bad things keep on happening to you, is it because of the people that you choose to hang out with? Is it because of the what I mean, it could be any number of things. I just use that as an example. But the fact is if all your friends are criminals, you're bound to end up in jail. Okay? It's just going to happen. Now, the other thing is if you're late for work all the time, there's probably a good chance you're going to get fired. You know, I mean, these things, these personal accountabilities, bad things do happen to good people. And that's where we've got to realize, okay, bad things will happen to good people. Life is not fair. It was never meant to be. But most of what happens to us, or a lot of what happens to us in life, has probably got something to do with how did we end up in this situation in the first place? Was there anything that I did? There may be several things that I could have never changed to lead to that situation, but were there any that I did that led to this point? Now, like I said, I don't like to feel powerless. I like to sit down and analyze everything that's going on and find out if there was something that I did to lead to this. Obviously, there's no way to say that every single thing in life can be avoided, but many times there are. That's where the personal accountability comes in my opinion, or
I
from
like
my
that.
life experience.
So the idea is about taking maybe a step back and looking at the bigger picture. There might be a scenario where this is something that I had no control of. I can't choose what someone else's uh, what their decision, what their actions are, but I can choose who I spend time with. I can choose to give a little bit more space in the freeway. I
Mhm.
can choose to not get upset and allow someone to merge. So I like that this is about giving ourselves more power and not more guilt. It's not saying everything that happens is somehow my fault. It's no, let's look at this. What can I prevent? Where do I have power to make a change? And as we become aware, again, it's going to work on that reticular activating system. Or at first, we might think, well, I'm not in control of anything. I don't have power over anything. Well, what do I have power over? And then as soon as we start to pay attention, more and more things will become clear so that we can have more control over our life, over our experience. So that is awesome. I am
Right.
all about empowering. Let's have our personal power. Let's be free. And I
Right.
think power is required for us to be free.
I think it absolutely is. And I just want to clarify something because I know there's going to be people, because I know people have said it to me before. I do not, I'm not saying blame the victim in certain cases, because that is what some people will hear in what I said. But it's really about another thing I talk about all the time is, what is your daily risk assessment? What is the risk factor associated with what I'm about to perform, right? Because most accidents are not truly accidents, because well, I mean, they're accidents, but they could have been prevented in some fashion, you know? So if we take that same analogy to just about everything that happens in our life, how can we mitigate the risks associated with what I'm about to do? And that's really what it is. It's not about blaming the victim, but it's about looking at, what am I about to encounter, and how can I take the power in this situation? How can I empower myself to mitigate all the bad things that could happen? And
And be able to reduce the bad that happens. I've heard it
correct.
said, if something hurts you, shame on them. If it happens twice, shame on you. Because at that point, hopefully we should have a little bit more information to be able to prevent something from happening. And I do appreciate that you brought up that not to blame the victim. I don't want to blame anybody. It's not about blame. It's about finding our power so that something bad doesn't continue to happen.
Correct.
Let's break the cycle. Let's find ways to get out. And if you are a victim of something, then let's heal and be able to move forward so it doesn't become a part forever. Wilk, this has been delightful. Is there anything you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Just the uh, the whole concept that we've been going over here, Linda. You want to see results, you will see results. I mean, I know in our conversation before, we talked about action items that came up in here. We've provided so many action items in this conversation, and the fact is life will always throw us curveballs. There are so many things in this world that are outside of our control. But the beautiful thing is we as individuals have the responsibility, again, to react the right way. And I just want to encourage people. Individual liberty is the best thing in the world. Reacting, we can't control everything that happens in this world. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we have an absolute responsibility to control how we react to it. Once you start to grasp and embody that mentality, life will get better.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. This has been delightful. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, "In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves, and the choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility." Today, I invite our listeners to take responsibility and accountability for their own choices. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the Free Stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.